Good morning, everyone. This is Gail Dudley, and it is time for News in Motion. Today is Wednesday, people. It is Wednesday, March the 23rd, 2022, and it is time for the headline news right here on News in Motion. I am your host, Gail Dudley. Do y'all know we're knocking on 2 years of this? It will come 2 years in June. June 2022 will mark the second year, and I'm so excited. I just can't even begin to tell you how excited I am. The faithfulness of all of you who tune in and you listen, you view, you watch the replays. We are just so grateful for you. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I see you, Camille Hopkins. I see you, Marion Jackson and Regina and Jeffrey Allen James and Shirley and Diane Ladybug. What's up, sister? Listen, I'm just excited. I see you. Kenny Stanley, good morning. Good morning, Davia. Good morning to you. Good morning to all of you. I see you, Tracy. What's up, Rhonda Clark? Rhonda, how's Texas, sister? The next time you in town, can you let a girlfriend know? So we can at least do something now that we can get out a little bit. I see you, Kelly Lee. Good morning, girl. Y'all, good morning. Good morning to my brother, Liz Pert. I see you, Camille Jones. I see you, Leah. I see all of you. I need a big favor for all of you who just came tuned in. I see you, Tony Morrison. Hit that impression button. Give it a heart, give it a thumbs up, do something. And then go ahead and share it to let people know they want to come check out what's happening here on News in Motion. I see the Facebook user. I think that's Nawana. I see you, Deborah Sneed. Rhonda Clark says, Texas is drying out. I saw the weather. And I'm going to be reporting a little bit on that in a little bit. I'm glad to know that you are indeed safe. You are safe. You are safe. Y'all, there's so much going on. It's still Women's History Month. So do me a favor. Put a link to one of your products or your services, women. Put a link in this thread to one of your products or your services. Nawana said, yes, ma'am, Miss Nawana. Nawana, your mom is so sweet. She was talking about your book. So please, please, please put your book in this thread, how people can order the book where you were a part of a collaboration project. I see you, Dr. Antoinette, girlfriend. Woo! We need some popcorn or something. Listen, y'all. I watched as much as I could of the confirmation hearings yesterday. We're going to talk about some of that. We're waiting for our guest to come in here into the virtual green room. She'll be with us momentarily, but I have so much I need to talk about. Kenny Stanley said Romper Room was one of my favorite shows. I love that Gail Dudley went back to calling out names. Listen, I tried not to do the names, but it's who I am, so I had to bring it back. I see you, Lori Wallace. I see you, Stephanie Burbridge Hall. I see all of you. Y'all, we have some news to cover. Again, we're waiting on our guest to join us in the virtual green room. She should be here momentarily. I see you, Pastor Alex. I see you, Adrian. I see you, Deborah Johnson. We have a lot. When I say a lot, y'all, we have a lot to talk about. And we're going to cover as much as we can within the time that we have. So y'all know what we have to do. Let's get this news started. Good morning, Latrice Jones. Good morning to you. Thank you, Deborah. Coaching the Dream book. Y'all, I can speak to that book. I read that book. I promoted that book. You really want to check out Deborah Johnson's book, Coaching the Dream. Y'all know she is a coach. So also, Deborah, put that information in there. Davia, put your information in there about how people can download and subscribe to your podcast. I see you, Diane Ladybug. Yes, y'all, this is the season for family reunions, corporate events, tailgate parties, whatever you want to book with Diane Ladybug. Happy hump day to you, Kim Edmondson and Camille. She's saying that she's not seeing us on YouTube. Now that's interesting. Now, you're let's see, YouTube. Okay, Camille saying she's not seeing me on YouTube. Well, we'll have to check that out. But Camille, guess what? You over here at LinkedIn now, so I'm glad you're over there so you can still tune in. We have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to cover. Hopefully, our guests will get into that green room momentarily. But until then, y'all, Ukraine is taking back territory. All I kept thinking when I was seeing them put up these flags all over the place, I said, that's called taking back territory. Didn't God say we would take back territory? So they're now starting to take back territory. They're using their flags to mark that it is so. Hello, somebody. They're taking back territory. Y'all can the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced yesterday his Liberal Party has reached a deal with the New Democratic Party to secure his minority government until 2025. Now, what's interesting to me is I kept reading that saying, what do you mean you secured a deal? Didn't the people have to vote for it? So it's just really interesting to see the differences of politics. And I see our guest in the green room. Y'all have no idea how excited I am. What's up, Julie Bryce? What's up? Y'all, also a tornado touched down in New Orleans last night, killing one person, destroying dozens of homes and knocking out power to thousands. So we want to be praying for them. Y'all, in Texas, one person was killed and 10 people injured while almost 20,000 homes remain without power this morning. Texas Governor Greg Abbott declared a severe weather disaster in 16 counties on yesterday. Now, y'all, talking about Texas, Texas is all going to be in the news today. Talking about Texas, Axios is reporting a former librarian in rural Texas County alleges that she was fired for insubordination after she refused to remove books from the shelves. Go on, girlfriend. Go on with your bad self. Yes, her name is Suzette Baker. She served as the head librarian. And she said, I'm not removing not a near book. Not doing it because all books are educational. Y'all, it's about 600. Kingsland is about 65 miles north of Austin. Now, the big picture is that she was like, no. And the government's telling them to remove books. And she's telling them, no, you, governor, I'll deal with the library. I said, go on, girl, go on. Now, listen, these were books dealing with the matters of race and gender, have been especially singled out by state lawmakers. We know one of them. We're going to be hearing about him in a few moments. Y'all, it's just crazy. So on March the 9th, she was terminated. Yeah, she was. She was terminated. Talking about she did not follow directives, allowing personal opinions to interfere with job duties and procedures. No, they're just books. Hello. And they're telling the truth. And then they go on and say your negative behavior and insubordinate and disruptive. That's what the letter says. They told her that she had negative behavior, was insubordinate and disruptive. No, you disruptive, trying to mess up the teaching of these young people. But it is what it is, y'all. She said this is flat out censorship. And she was also accused of her appearance. I don't get what all that is. But yeah, y'all can just Google her. Her name again, her name is Suzette Baker. Suzettee Baker. That's what's happening, y'all. This is crazy. This is crazy. All right, y'all. Baker, who says she was paid $35,000 per year, tells Axios she is looking for legal representation as she prepares to sue the county over her firing. And there's a lot of GoFundMe's out there to pay for attorneys. There are attorneys saying, I'll do it pro bono. I think she has a list, but if you know somebody just powerful, go ahead and submit that name to her. She is accepting any name so she can vet out the different attorneys and they can take over her case. All right, y'all, that was some quick news I wanted to share with you, but here's today's focus. Today's focus is all on the confirmation hearing. Wow. I had to take it in doses yesterday. I had to take it in some small doses yesterday. I would watch and I don't know, there was just something that was going on. I said, there's something about how these questions are going that are very troubling. Very troubling. So, y'all, let me tell you about this amazing, powerful woman. She's a powerhouse, y'all. And I'm so happy that she said yes to join me here on News in Motion. Why? Because she finds herself in appearances on MSNBC, on NPR, on PBS, and others. Anyway, she's Dr. Trice Washington, y'all. She is an associate professor at North Carolina Central University. Prior to joining the political science department at NCCU, Dr. Washington was an associate professor of political science at Otterbein University in Westerville, Ohio. I'm not going to go over everything, but listen, y'all, Dr. Washington has this aptitude that networks needs to deliver to their viewers as well. And she's an amazing interviewer. Dr. Trice Washington was educated in American government and public administration. Latrice received her Ph.D. from Howard University in 2002 and focused on the American legislative and electoral process while concentrating on American foreign policy. Her 2014 publication, Political Scandals, hello somebody, the consequences of temporary gratification, brought her critical acclaim for the content and ramifications considered in the piece. She is also the author of the Veterans Millennium Health Care Act of 1999, was published in 2003. Dr. Washington has been interviewed by journalists on local news affiliates WCMH, NBC4, WSYX, ABC6. She's also appeared, as I said, on MSNBC with Chris Jansen. She has also been invited to be a guest on All Sides with Ann Fisher. That's WOSU NPR, Face the State. She's also been quoted in New York Times, the Christian Science Monitor, the Associated Press, and on and on and on. She's just a bomb.com. So Isaiah, please bring in Dr. Latrice Washington. What's up?
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear you. You now reside in Charlotte, correct? No, Raleigh.
Well, I live in a suburb, so Apex is about 2 miles from Cary. I think most people know Cary, North Carolina.
Okay. All right. I'm just so thankful and glad that you could join us here. I don't know if you'll see the chat because sometimes you got to look both ways. So we'll put up different questions as they're coming in. But I want us to get started because I want to dedicate all of this, the remaining time, except for the inspirational message, to this. Now, yesterday I shared about the nomination process so that people had an understanding of what was taking place. Today, I would really like us to focus on what took place yesterday and to drill down what's really going on. So my first question, Dr. Washington, with all your knowledge and expertise, is a lot of this having to do with the GOP positioning themselves for the 2024 presidential race?
Absolutely. So at this stage and at this point in history, it doesn't matter who the nominee is in terms of the banter. The party out of power is always going to banter, play to their constituency. It's on the record, so they can always say, even when the person gets through, well, we stood our ground. We actually advocated for the stance and the values and the belief system that we have, articulated in elections, and it gives them something else to take back. So they do go hard. We actually saw this as well with Trump's nominee, who now sits on the bench, and considering that piece would be expected, right? There are other things that we're expected too, right? And we're seeing that, but that would be the first piece that no matter what, they will do that, because this is also a life tenure position, right?
Right.
And so the expectation is that once they're seated, preferably because of merit, right? That the understanding is they will have a lifetime impact. And although she's been asked, what about making public policy? We have to recognize as well as the general public that while the Constitution didn't really spell out much about the Supreme Court other than Congress can create one and other courts, the framers didn't know much about the judicial system in Great Britain. And so as they're experimenting, they really didn't expect it to grow into what it's become. And so they didn't really give a lot of a template in terms of how they were even to function. So that has evolved over time as well. And so indirectly, they do create policy by determining whether what Congress, the president, or states have done is in fact constitutional.
Right. So yes, to all of that. With that, and I agree, because I had to pause a couple of times yesterday, and I could remember then Senator Kamala Harris or Senator Cory Booker and so forth, how they were, I won't say that they were necessarily badgering, but they were being matter of fact. But if we can break this apart. And again, I think Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson handled herself very well. But I also could see that from my seat, I felt they were also trying to break her. For some reason, as a Black woman watching this, some of the moments really came at me. So let's talk about, if I can, let's talk about Lindsey Graham, Republican senator from South Carolina. Now, first of all, he seemed all over the place with his questionings. And then he also went after complaining about how conservative Supreme Court nominees have been treated in their confirmation. I couldn't go against him on that, because that did happen. But then he went into fuming over the different groups that Judge Brown Jackson were a part of. And then he asked her about the 9/11, was it an act of war? And then he asked her about personal feelings. And then he really started just ramming to me with the Guantanamo Bay detainees. Can you speak to that at all? And I know you can't be in his head, but with what you do, and if you're in the classroom talking to your students as a professor, how would y'all break this apart so that we, the viewers, can understand some of this?
So if you take each of those issues that he brings forth, first and foremost, there's a great divide in terms of how conservatives view those things and how liberals view those things. He sees her as a liberal. I don't think she's really, quote unquote, necessarily a complete liberal. She's
Right.
probably closer to moderate than liberal, but still closer to liberal than conservative, right? Which means he's anticipating that she's not a strict constructionist, right? If she views those issues and the policies around them that develop very differently than he does and his constituency and his peers, then he's trying to label and fit her in a box of being a more loose constructionist or flexible, which means he anticipates that she sees the Constitution
Right.
and law as flexible, and that as society, develops, it's possible that the meaning behind it can change, as opposed to his desire would be to just read it as it is. If the framer said it, that's what they meant. If they didn't say it, that's not what they meant. He knows that that's not what she's going to do. No one knows exactly what she will do. She doesn't
Right.
know exactly what she will do. She hasn't seen the case, right? She hasn't heard any oral arguments, so she can't make a determination. And that's the beauty about really being a sensible, deliberative judge, is you don't, even when you have some idea in terms of, okay, this case is coming, you've not seen the facts. So he's playing again to the audience. But I will also say this, and this is in terms of Lindsey Graham and others. We have to remember they're politicians. So part of it is political, but we also have to understand he's not a jurist.
Right.
He's not trained in the law.
Right.
Politicians have to be generalists. They have to know a lot about a lot of different things, and they do have areas that they specialize in. This is not an area that he specializes in. So it's banter, it's wasting time. And I will say that too was expected, not just of Lindsey Graham, but of others. Why? Because this is a nominee that has sat before the Senate Judiciary Committee twice already, three times already. And so this is the third time. And so that's another part of why she's composed, and it will take a lot to break her. She's been there before. The Senate Judiciary Committee has confirmed her twice. So now they have to say there's something wrong with her. And the question that the public and those who follow these processes will say, well, if there was something wrong with her, surely there was something wrong with her the first time, the second time. What do you mean the third time there's an issue, right? Because these are things that came forward. Now, obviously, there's a span of time between the second time that she sat there and got confirmed and this time. And that's where some of the tension will be. But yes, they just want to ruffle her feathers. And a lot of African-American women, Black women in particular, felt a little, I don't want to use the word traumatized, but anxious and nervous, not for the purpose that she will not necessarily do well and be confirmed, but traumatizing because many of us have had to sit in meetings ago with the perched lips, right? The black girl magic where you know that someone's throwing some stuff at you and it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, I know I'm in the skin that I'm in, but by the same token, you know that you've gone to Harvard, you know that you've been at Central, North Carolina Central, the Eagles are there. We know what Eagles do. Eagles rise, Eagles soar no matter what.
Right.
And so she's composed as she should be. That comes with, for a lot of educated Black women, that comes as a part of really the transitioning into who we are becoming, and I would even say who God has created us to be. And in becoming that and getting to that stage, there's a lot of ugliness that the public often doesn't see
Right.
because the spotlight isn't always on Black women in the sense of those types of moments, but history is capturing it. And so there's a lot of things happening even in those moments where she's sitting and but she's giving some faces too,
Oh,
right?
she's giving some faces. She's giving some faces, which brings me up to this part because I loved her pause. And of course, it was hard for me to even watch the Ted Cruz piece because of his airport incident over
Mm,
the weekend. I think Isaiah has an image of that for those who are wondering. He was there, and eyewitnesses said the exchange between the United Airline ticket booth counter people and him, and then security ended up coming, and his exchange with security, thank you Isaiah, was that people were saying he was asking the question. There's several eyewitnesses, and there's a few videos on Twitter where you really can't hear exactly what he's saying back from his gesture. People are saying as eyewitnesses who were standing right there saying he was like, do you know who I am? So that was already on Twitter. But then he goes into this rant, and that image was from Fox News, New York. He goes into this rant. Do you agree that babies are racist? And he was referring to a children's book about racism. And then he goes on to say, he's almost to a point of badgering her, saying that this book is one of the most stunning books taught at Georgetown Day School. And then he holds up a copy of the book. Then he says, he asked Judge Brown Jackson if she agreed that this book is being taught. And then she took a long pause, and I loved it. And she came back with this quote: I have not reviewed any of those books, any of those ideas, Jackson said. They do not come up in my work as a judge, which I am respectfully here to address. Now, that long pause was amazing. She goes on to say, an academic theory taught in law schools. This is when he tried to bring in the critical race theory. And then she says, not in elementary schools like Georgetown Day School. So those of us who are viewing, those of us who are constituents of these different senators, what can we do, if anything? I know they're playing hardball. For me, I think they were personally trying to break her. And you're right, it's all political. They're trying to put themselves out there and to have their sound bites for the future. But at the same time, is this what we want running this country? So can you speak to that from your expertise? You are a professor, you've written many articles, you've been on many shows and broadcasts. Help us so that we know what to do as constituents, please.
okay. So let's as constituents, first and foremost, we need to know who our representatives and our senators are, and not just in terms of Congress, but on all levels, right?
Yes.
Because all politics is local. We like to focus on national, but a lot of the tone of what happens on the national level starts at the grassroots level. So locally, what's happening, right? Are you in touch? And the more we spend our time there, it's easier to then get to the place on the national level where we're dealing with the broader scope, because the scope and the jurisdiction is different. They have to think about the nation, right? So, and many times they're district oriented in the House, but then they also have to be state oriented and nation oriented at the same time. And so what is going to win out? Now, we're in a time where it's not like we've not been here before, right? If you turn the television off or if you have it on and it's in black and white, sometimes it looks like the 50s, looks like the 60s, early 70s, right after what were supposed to be the civil rights gains. But especially for constituents, for members of the electorate, for citizens who check in and check out, it's problematic, right? Because elections are consistent. And so when we check in, we check out, we're giving almost by default, not even almost by default, we're essentially handing over elections, handing over seats, handing over positions of power to individuals oftentimes that do not represent the interests of the masses and do not represent the interests of racial minorities, women, in many instances, children. Definitely, they don't represent the interests of the poor, right? They say the working class, but if you think about working class and you look at IRS tax code, technically speaking, that's $1 above poverty level. And some of us are patting ourselves on our back. I'm so comfortable, I'm middle class. Well, where? $1 above poverty level or $999,999, right? That's the range. And that's why the divide between middle class in terms of desires are so drastically different, right? Because we could probably divide that in multiple ways. But hearing a person say, "Oh, you're middle class," gives us comfort, because really that teaches us to compare ourselves to the poor, not to the 1% that owns everything. But and that also shapes the mindset, even of how the middle class votes, right?
Right.
If we aligned ourselves a bit more, or allowed those impoverished to align themselves with it, then the masses could really hit the ballot box in a way for change. But that's also why the resistance comes when they do see, okay, oh, they showed up, right? Ooh, they're getting a taste of what their power actually is. But also for those who have gotten a taste, like the last couple of elections, we can't allow ourselves to be frustrated when our candidate of choice doesn't win. We won't always have every win.
Right.
But when we're voting on the local level, the state level, and the federal level, on the national level, we will see far more wins in terms of who did I vote for. But when we're inconsistent, many times what we desire is drastically different. So we're voting for people who oftentimes don't yet have the votes to push forward. So, and then I'm just going to say it because that's who I am. We are really wrestling still with the history of white supremacy, which is woven in the fabric of this country. It is at the very foundation, and white supremacists are not easily willing to let it go. There's still people who are upset that they lost the Civil War, right? So you have these redactionists, these historians, self-appointed historians who rewrite history. And it's important for the electorate as a whole to be educated, to utilize that knowledge every day, and especially when it's time to vote, but to be informed, as my dear deceased pastor would say, "Doctor, how do we get informed voters?" Because uninformed voters can be tricked.
Yes. Right? Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Uninformed voters can be tricked, right? There are lots of little tactics in which individuals can use to steal votes, to deter people from voting. And if you're not consistent and you're not engaged beyond just where do I go to vote, the last ditch effort to shift can catch people just by not knowing.
Right.
So we
And
need
that's
to
one of
mobilize.
the things that we try to do here on News in Motion, is to keep people educated. I know you've been in the chat and things like that. And sometimes I have to be honest, sometimes I find myself extremely frustrated because when I hear someone speaking and then I say, "Well, are you a registered voter?" and they say no. I really want to shut down the conversation, but I know I can't because I need to spend at least the next 60 or 90 seconds trying to communicate why it is important for them to register to vote and then actually go out and vote. There are so many people that just go by the sound bites, Dr. Washington, and there's so many people who just want to hear the rumblings, but they really don't want to take the time to even research and get to the root of what's really going on. So even when I was listening to Cotton and Holly and Ted Cruz and even Senator Graham, who actually acted like a toddler, jumped up and walked out, I'm like, what is happening? But I have to be honest. And I also have to turn to the Democratic senators and say, why are y'all coddling? Ask some of the tough questions that you know she can answer to show that this is a fair game. So is there a strategy to why they're not, are they giving her a rest after 30 minutes of hard attacking type content? Is there a lack of strategy? Can you please speak to that? Because right now, over the past, let's say 6 or 7 months, I'm looking at the Democratic Party as somewhat weak, and I'm wondering where their strength will arise. So please
Um,
speak to that.
so as it pertains to the Democrats, they really are behaving much the way the Republicans did, right? The last
Yeah.
nomination that we observed. And so when we actually see that, that's part of it, right? It doesn't matter who one group pacifies and then the
Right.
other goes in hard. I do think agree with you, and I'll say it this way: for as educated, as accomplished as she is, I think that the Democratic members that are going extremely soft and really not asking, hard hitting questions, they already know she can answer them. So ask them.
Right.
Let her be on display since she's on display, and let her show all of the beauty of the intellectual workings of her mind that she has spent all these years cultivating.
Yes.
So yes, they're doing a disservice. I do agree with you, and I said this, and I can't remember which newspaper printed it. And I ended up getting a letter from Sherrod Brown, but it was printed nationally, and I said that the Democratic Party was weak. And this was around the presidential election prior to, and they had just named Biden. And I said they had a lot of work to do with building coalitions, with bringing in voters that they have distanced themselves from,
Yeah.
who don't really believe they're genuinely advocating for them, but you come back around just as everyone does for the votes, then you get in and our issues aren't addressed, and then we fall off, and then you come back. And
Yeah.
Sherrod Brown was like, Yeah, we do." And I specifically said for a lot of women, African Americans, for middle
Yeah.
class individuals, but especially for those that are impoverished, right? And they're weak. I'm actually concerned, about the fact that the clock is ticking for another presidential election. Who do they have, right? And even if it's Biden and my soror Kamala Harris, they are going to get a lot of criticism. They deserve a lot of criticism based
Yes.
off of what they said versus what they're doing, and that is honest. And I think oftentimes, because we either want to win or we want to maintain power if we have it, we don't ask the critical, relevant questions. And I think that for me is going to go down in history as the worst moment that was missed,
Yeah.
because everyone believes she's going to sit on the bench, but let her go in, right, with all of the glory I believe God wants people to
Yes.
see, right?
Yes.
Black woman on the stage. And I will go back to some of your previous questions about um, these senators. A couple of years ago, a study came out and it declared that the most educated demographic in America was the Black woman. So there's a legitimate reason to fear us. There's a legitimate for white supremacists in particular. Why? Because we are educated. Why? Because we're going into areas that we've been in, but we're also being used to blaze trails, and doors are being kicked down, because oftentimes they have to be kicked down. We have to show up prepared, but we have to do the work. And oftentimes there is some direct or indirect force to elevating us into those positions. And so it's just unfortunate that this hearing is going this way. It's predictable. We expected it. However, she is such a brilliant thinking individual who has so many years of service and accomplishment. And that should be the primary thing that the Democrats are trying to display.
Wow, love that. I love that. If I can ask one more question. Oh, that just really touched me good. If I can ask one more question, we are looking at the midterms.
Mhm.
Once, because they're trying to get her confirmed before their Easter break. I
Mhm.
believe they're ready to trying to get her confirmed by April the 11th, if I remember the date correctly. So let's say that happens, and my hope is that it happens. When they return back to session after the Easter break, what would you say would be the top three things that collectively we should begin focusing on? Because I actually think their messaging is horrific. It's off. And it's like they need to get a better message. But what would be three things you believe that should be the top focus coming back leading up to the midterms?
For the Democratic Party, for the parties in
Democratic Party
general.
and then also the Republican Party.
In all honesty, they are in it. So let me say this. So while the messaging seems like it's all over the place, we have to remember that the American electorate, the American public is all over the place,
Yeah.
right? We've had the pandemic. Certain issues have come to the forefront. There have been demographics that hadn't necessarily been touched beyond to wear the mask, not wear the mask, or did I catch COVID?
Yeah.
Now the economics is hitting much harder, right? For everyone.
Yes.
And so they have to rally around, okay, economically, what will the policies be? They need to address ooh, the middle class has been so splintered. So I think that's another major issue. They will have to clearly codify what is their position on American foreign policy. Many times we don't, it's not at the forefront. It's happening every day. Troops are deployed, peacekeeping, and or we have these military battles that a lot of people don't constantly know about.
Mhm.
Every now and then something comes to the forefront, and Russia is always going to be a big deal because of our history.
Right.
If I thought about one other, hmm, gender.
Gender.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay.
But they're
Now, would
all
you
over the
say that
place because the people are there, and they're trying to hit all of those demographics, and the
right.
messaging being all over the place is intentional. That
Okay.
too is intentional.
I got you. So would you say that would be the messaging for both parties, or were you focused more on Democrat? And if so, what would be like 2 to 3 for the GOP?
That would be a little bit across the board,
Okay.
and then specifically the Democrats. A lot of voters have been lost since the presidential election.
Okay.
And so individuals who plan to vote in the midterms should be paying very close attention, right? We
Okay.
don't know what they have. You know, again, COVID, the pandemic has worn a lot of people out.
Right. Right.
And many of us have been zoomed to death, even though this type of platform is probably going to be at least an option where things can be hybrid and draw people in from all over, as opposed to just stay where you physically are. Um, the Democrats need to work on electoral strategy. They really need to go in and play hardball with themselves, be honest. and determine what is necessary, not to woo voters, because voters are tired of being wooed, like that romantic thing that happens when you date and then you're like, ew, that's who you are.
Right.
They need the consistency, and they are very inconsistent with many of the demographics that we've already discussed. And
Okay.
so at this juncture, life has gotten really hard. We've lived through a pandemic. We see people for who they are. I think a lot of people are less likely to just turn a blind eye and give it to the Democrats just because they don't want a Republican. Whereas the Republican Party, even when their messaging is off, Republicans will vote Republican. The
Period.
odds of them shifting and breaking that ticket is very limited, but the odds of a Democratic registered voter shifting is far greater.
Period. I agree
Period.
with that. And I just lied to you. So let me first ask for your forgiveness for lying. I do have one more question. Are we going to see voting rights pass?
Oof. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. But when you look at the rhetoric and you look at of President Biden, and you look at the rhetoric even of Vice President Kamala Harris,
Yeah.
they're essentially mute.
Yeah.
Right? Which many of us expected.
Right.
And so again, for those who gave their vote to stave off what people expected would be like, wait a minute, where are they trying to take us back to?
Right.
It's been stagnant, right? So the progress and some of those gains haven't happened. So I think that's very, very problematic. I'm hopeful. What I will say is to kind of paraphrase something my mother always said to me along my life's journey. Even if someone makes it more difficult for you, right? Because we've come from the history of difficulty. So we know what to do if voting rights isn't there. We know what to do if it's there, but there's great resistance. But we need to impress upon people, especially people like us,
right,
that the diminishing is evidence that they understand the power of what happens when we show up on one accord, we show up in unity, and we vote together.
Yes.
In a block. But society splinters us, right? And we're fighting against one another. Some of us think we have it because we are living comfortably, and so we're not concerned about the others that it's far more difficult for. And so I'd like to say it, but I would tell people progress and move forward, plan and strategize as though it won't happen, and figure out how you're going to build your coalitions, figure out how you're going to educate those who don't know, and maybe even some of these brunches that people are having socially, invite individuals and ask someone to bring someone that you know is resistant to voting, or bring someone that you know isn't really plugged in and tuned in. And in a nice little social conversation, some of those moments can happen where it doesn't seem as though someone's trying to intimidate you or put on display your lack of understanding or intelligence about a subject matter. Not that people are lack intelligence, but about this particular subject matter. Because in our country, it takes about 33 years to master the way that campaigns and elections and politics plays. So if you plug in earlier at 18, by the time you're middle-aged, you get it. But if you're plugging in at 30, you're a senior citizen by the time you get it. And so I think those are key things. But our history is rich with examples of what to do when society tries to strip us of our power, strip us of our humanity. And despite it all, we have thrived. Call your representatives, call your senators, write letters, do it in bulk, and do it simultaneously. Whether you determine, once a week, once a month, really once a week. We're gonna blow up their phones. Why? Blow up their phones until they have to take it off the hook. That's
Yes.
the way that they understand in DC that the voters are hot about something, and
Yes.
it's a hot button issue. Until keep calling until they have to, the staffers have to take it off the hook because it's just that disturbing. They hear
Yeah.
that as well.
You
And
you
show
speak
up.
my language. Keep going. Yeah, y'all gotta go. We know you gotta go, but we're wrapping it up. Go ahead. Keep
and,
going
and,
because you are speaking my language.
and show up. Show up. And for those of us that maybe have degrees and we kind of walk in a certain confidence, recognize that for some people that can be intimidating if they've not experienced certain successes, if
Mhm.
they've not developed that level of confidence. So I was taught, no matter what environment I'm in, be able to be a chameleon.
Mhm.
I can go into a housing project, carry myself, interact, and people will think, okay, she doesn't look like she might, maybe she's from here, not because I respect everyone. But
Mhm.
many times we stay in our own little communities in our microcosm, and
Yeah.
we wonder why others aren't doing. And sometimes we've forgotten to go back for them. W.E.B. Du Bois always talked about the talented 10th. Prior to his aging and death, he wrote an apology. They didn't become more selfless or sacrificial. They became more selfish. They got theirs and they kept it moving. Well, voting rights is something no matter where we are in the spectrum economically, it's coming for us
Right.
as African Americans. And so we have to very, very much understand um, that none of us are better than another. And the political games that are played with legislation works to diminish any and every one of us that is not a part of that 1%.
Yeah. Wow, this has been rich. I thank you. I appreciate you joining me this
Thank you.
morning. We have so much work to do. I'm in it. I'm in it. I'm in it for the fight. You and I have talked about me running before, and I was like, absolutely not. I'm gonna stay on this side. I'm like, I'm staying on this side to do what I am, to do at this moment. Kenny Stanley said, you two, Gail E. Dudley and Dr. Trice Washington, need to come together on a political show that educates us. You both have big voices, and this is in your lane. Well, I want to remind, I'm sure you remember this. Remember I met you up at Otterbein. I don't know, maybe it was a year and a half, 2 years. It was before the pandemic, right
Mhm.
before the pandemic. And we talked about doing a book or something. So we have had conversations of what we could do, but I love that we should do more of this. And so I'm just so excited. Congratulations again on your appointment there in North Carolina. You're doing big things. I'm following you. I'm seeing what's happening. Davia says, brilliant, brilliant guest. Thank you, Dr. Washington. Many people are just saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I want to say thank you. Y'all, before we get out of here, this is the inspirational message. And Dr. Trice Washington is also Reverend Dr. Trice Washington. And so with that, I just want everyone to join us and others around the United States today to pray and to fast for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, her parents, her husband, and daughters and family. I cannot imagine her mother sitting there. I know they know what to expect, but I'm sure her mother is probably warring on her behalf. I found myself praying for her mother yesterday because I believed her mother was praying for her. So for the inspirational message, if we could just designate today to just go into a time of praying and fasting for this process. I even went as far this morning to pray that God would show up in that space today. And not only show up in that space today, but that people who are ready to come with attack and awe and to fight, that they will be silenced, that they would shrink back. Now, I don't know if God's going to answer that prayer. Maybe God's trying to show us how strong she is and that he has ordained her for such a time as this. But if we could just join in that time of praying and fasting, I would just greatly appreciate it, because many people are joining together today to do that. Dr. Trice Washington, again, I say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, everybody, we've gone over, but thank you. I see that y'all didn't really go anywhere today. Y'all stuck with it because y'all know this information is important. So now we need to share this. The replay will be up and available. Let people know that there's a lot that's here and we need to pay attention to it and then take action. That's my call to action for you today. All right, y'all, stay well, everyone, and remember to make some bold moves. We're out.